So about a year and a half ago, I found myself in the worst shape I had been in my life, both physically, mentally, relationship-wise. There were just a lot of things in my life, including a, very burnout professional situation. And I just found myself at a point in life where I needed some change. So everything started by, me getting to a point with my job that I just felt like I couldn't go on anymore. I was extremely burnt out, and I think just, doing the same thing in a very repetitive role for around 5 years just kind of really did me in. So decided to leave the job, decided to leave Denmark, and as you can see, I'm clearly back in Denmark, but that's neither here nor there. And decided to take some time away. I think I started off at first not really knowing exactly what my aim was. I knew that I was stuck in a job where I was very unhappy. I think that there were several other factors, being in this poor health that were just leading me to be very, very unhappy. So I had one of these very real look in the mirror moments, Nick, it's time to make a change. And so I decided to leave the job and leave Denmark. But I think early on, I see a lot of people leaving jobs, whether they're getting fired, and not really having a plan. And I think that was luckily something that I told myself very early on. Let's set some goals. Let's actually have a little bit of structure around this, sabbatical period. And at first I did not know how long it was going to be. I didn't know if it was going to be 3 months. I didn't know if it was going to be 6 months, 5 years. I had really no idea from the beginning, but I knew I wanted to take some time and was in a place financially where it made sense for me to take some time and, kind of fix some things in life that needed to be fixed. So I ended up going back to the United States in October of 2023. And, I think when I first landed back, I made sure to sit down and structure a plan around exactly what I wanted to do and exactly what I wanted to accomplish during my sabbatical period. So I remember the first thing that popped into my mind was completing a physical challenge, something very challenging that I knew that maybe I would never repeat in my life, but something to kind of prove to myself that I could do it from a physical perspective. So after a little bit of research, there had always been something in the back of my mind that I wanted to do a long distance cycling trip. So did a bit of research and landed on Japan. And in my past relationship, I was with a Japanese partner, and I really wanted to take some time to learn about the country, being that I'd only been there once, for around 2 weeks, about 10 years ago. So I decided on Japan. And I knew that I wanted to do, something that I wasn't going to repeat again, something that was, that pushed me both mentally and physically. So what I decided to do was fly to the south of Japan and start cycling north throughout the entire country. So in that process, I was cycling around 75, 80 kilometers a day, and then I would get to my destination that I had mapped out the day before and, find a place to camp. And then I would wake up the next morning, give me a breakfast from the convenience store, and then set out on my merry way. So this is what I was doing. And then every maybe every fifth night, I would find myself a hotel or an Airbnb and, get a nice, clean, comfortable, dry bed, do some laundry, that sort of thing. So I did this for about, I would say a month. And I think that, on the stops and, in the evenings after I would ride, I would stop and I would grab a beer. I would go to, a local pub and I would, talk to people, and, it was a great way to socialize. But I've kind of realized throughout this whole process that, I had this habit with alcohol, that it was not necessarily a positive relationship. So what I decided to do at that point was to take a little bit of a break. After about the first month, I took a little halfway pit stop and took a week off of cycling and spent a week in the mountains in Nagano. So during that week, I actually had one big day drinking. And I think that, something that I realized was after, 20 years of partying hard, I'd built up quite a tolerance to alcohol. So after spending the day drinking, I probably had, 12 or 15 beers. And kind of realized at that point, these are really making me feel like shit. So I drank all day. I was completely bloated after, all of those beers. And then, went home, absolutely hammered, fell asleep, fully clothed, and woke up the next morning with just crippling anxiety. And I kind of remember laying in the bed that morning and thinking, you know what? Fuck this. This is not how I want to feel. Drinking no longer serves me. It's something that just leads me to be overweight. I had high blood pressure. My resting heart rate was 90, 95. And it was just really serving me in absolutely no way. So I decided at that point, you know what? I'm going to take a little break from drinking. And decided when I, took the train back and continued my route from where I had taken a bit of a break, that I wasn't going to drink anymore. So as time went on, the first week, I guess I didn't really notice that much of a difference, right? But as I kept going and kind of got into, my second week, my third week, my fourth week, I started to feel really good and started to feel, some of the best that I had ever felt, both physically, mentally, and started to say, kind of notice the bank account wasn't going down as quickly as it had before. Because, especially in Copenhagen, it's, around $10 for every pint when you go out. And if you go out and you drink 10, that's quite a bit of money going down the drain. So, those couple of weeks turned into months. Completed the rest of the Japan trip. And I think that from that, physical workout I was getting every day, the fact that I wasn't drinking for most of the trip, I dropped about, 25 or 30 pounds. And I think that, I realized that removing alcohol and kind of reestablishing this relationship with it made me realize that it was good for me physically. It was good for me mentally. It led me to have, better relationships with friends and family in my life. And it really just made a more positive experience for really everything in my life. And kind of looked back at it and thought hey, what is it? What is it that kept me doing it for so long? And I think it was just my default setting. That it was just the idea that, to go out and socialize, you have to have a beer in your hand. You have to continue drinking, after work on Friday. Yeah, we're going for beers. Yeah, we're going to hang out. We're going to the bar. We've got to do these things. And I think it just took a simple reframing of taking that one element out of it to really open my eyes to, how much this just was not adding, not contributing, and actually kind of taking away from my quality of life. So, rewinding, I think the last beer that I had was on, if I'm not mistaken, the 18th of May of 2024. So at this moment, we're about 17, 18 months into, alcohol-free life. And I can say that I feel better than I've ever felt. I think that, the way I would kind of describe the effects is, physically, I'm down from about 210 pounds. So I guess that's around 203 kilos, down to 75, which is in the 160, 168 pounds. So I've lost about 50 pounds, about 20, about 25 odd, 27 odd kilos. So in the best shape I've ever been in, even including when I was in, my peak physical form, 17, 18 years old. I am the same size, but honestly, looking at my level of fitness, I'm definitely more fit than I was then. So I'm in the best shape of my life. I think, when it comes to a mental health perspective, I would say that it's been a very interesting and eye-opening experience. I think that, initially it took away this built-in anxiety, kind of crippling anxiety that I had for the longest time, and really took that away. So I noticed that after like a month, that completely went away. I think that as time went on, I think that this sobriety led to a lot of changes in my life just due to the fact that I think that I got so used to this version of reality that being sober gave me this incredible amount of clarity. So I think it took away the anxiety. It kind of really took away the clouds from my judgment and gave me an extreme sense of clarity. But I think that the other side of the coin with that, which is sometimes the difficult thing to deal with, is that now that you have this clarity, you can see these situations. You can kind of take this, third-party point of view perspective on your life and your relationships and your job and, all of these different things. And you just have a whole new sense of clarity on it. So I think that it has, forced me to, not forced me, I don't think that that's the right thing to say. I think that it is more of a, it's given me the opportunity and, I think clarity is just simply the best word instead of struggling to find something fancy to say here, of just being able to see things that had just, kind of become mixed into the soup in the past and really fix those things, really tackle and have uncomfortable conversations and really do, things the right way in life. So I think that the physical part has been awesome. And I've definitely supplemented that with the running and working out, averaging like 4 or 5 days a week. It's given me, really absolutely depleted my anxiety and given me clarity that I never had before. I will say that, it hasn't been without its struggles. I think that, in the past, I've never struggled, in terms of social situations. I'm very outgoing. I really love, connecting with people. I love talking. And, it was something that always kind of maybe helped a little bit in that regard. I think that now I find myself just a bit more reserved. I would say that clarity, I don't have to talk just to fill the void. I really want to talk to have quality conversations. Hello. Hi. Hello. Do you want to be on camera? You are the cutest thing in the world. Oh my goodness. Hi. We're best friends now, okay? So cute. Hello. We can be best friends. Say hello. Have a good one. But yeah, this, I think this clarity has made social situations a little bit different for me. So, I have struggled a bit. I think that the built-in friendships and relationships you have, sometimes they're built around alcohol. And I think I've realized that my social battery does not last very long when I am in a bar or drinking situation. I think that clarity, again, it leaves you not necessarily wanting to sit there and, be in a crowded room full of people that are just sitting there kind of drinking their life away, if you will. So it's kind of changed the way I socialize. I don't think that I had put myself in as many social situations as I did before. And then I think also, it's just kind of a change in habits, a change in hobbies, and me really focusing on, doing things that are making me and life better. I want to be around people that, that really thrive on that side of things. I don't want to spend my Friday night, spending $100 at a pub, waking up on Saturday feeling shit-faced, being super anxious. Check it out, bike tours. That is going to be me this week. But, it kind of made me realize that socialization is just a bit different. I can be in the bar. I really love the taste of beer. I can really enjoy like a non-alcoholic beer. But, I think that finding myself in those situations are a little bit fewer and far between now. So, I think that it was a long time coming. I think that it was I really think that if it wouldn't have been for this trip and kind of this life-changing experience that I had going through this trip in Japan, I don't think that it would have, been something that really came to fruition. So, I'm really thankful and blessed for that experience. But yeah, really encourage anybody watching this, if you, have considered, cutting out alcohol. I think that, when I look at things in life and I look at decisions that I can make, I really love ones that are low effort, high yield. And I think that if I look back at decisions I've made that are low effort, high yield, I think that, cutting out alcohol is definitely the biggest one of those. So yeah, if you are thinking about it, give it a try. Try it out for a week, try it out for 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks turn into 2 months. 2 months turns into 2 years. But yeah, I know that there are a lot of resources online for people that are looking to get help with this sort of thing. But I think for me, it was luckily something I was able to kind of tackle with just a decision of wanting to get better and, making a positive effect in my life. So yeah, I hope this helps somebody out there. And as always, have a good one.